On this program, another issue, on this program last night, former Labor MP Michael Danby had this to say about the United States' dereliction of duty, he called it, when it comes to supporting Ukraine.
I'm very worried the Biden administration has only provided 4 rocket systems to Ukraine to counter the massive artillery that the Russians are using to crush all of their cities. 4! All of this talk about rocket systems being provided by the United States. Now, they've been generous with their aid packages, but 4 rocket systems in a country the size of France are not going to be able to counter the Russians.
Now, Peter, if you believe the PR, you think the US is giving plenty of support, and they are in terms of cash. But as Michael Danby pointed out, this is a commitment for only 4 rocket launcher systems. What should happen here?
I think it's a strange situation that Washington has got itself into, Peter, because they're providing lethal equipment, but it would seem just never enough to quite make it possible for the Ukrainians to pursue decisive military outcomes. So we know the United States is not going to provide combat aircraft. The United States is not going to provide air cover to stop the Russian military from being able to fly over Ukraine. And this decision about the rocket system, not only is it just 4 units, they're also giving the Ukrainians very limited range munitions to fire from those rocket systems, whereas what they actually need is long range stuff, because they're actually fighting the Russians across an internal front that I would say is probably about 800 kilometres in length. So at the moment, I think what the Biden administration needs to do is to come to a decision that it's either going to help the Ukrainian system pursue decisive military victory against the Russians, or it's not. Instead of which, we're in a sort of a halfway house where the Ukrainians can keep on fighting, but they haven't got the means to actually prosecute victory. And right now, Peter, I'm actually writing about this for the Weekend Australian. The Ukrainian war is on a very delicately balanced situation. It could go either way. The Russians are starting to make small gains. So this is the moment where we do need to be providing Ukraine with decisive military assistance and doing it very quickly.
Just before we go, with your defence expertise, I've got to ask you for your view on whether we go down the path of throwing into the mix between Collins and a nuclear submarine another sort of conventional build. And what do you make of Peter Dutton's revelations that he was well on the path to getting Virginia-class nuclear subs built in the US here before the end of the decade?
Look, I think it's time for the government to allow a pretty open investigation into what exactly the current situation is. I would hope that Dutton is right and that we can get access to those 2 Virginia-class submarines quickly. But even so, we're still talking about something that could be 8-10 years away, and no one really knows. In the meantime, the other thing that I think both sides of politics have been unclear about is the Collins-class submarine sufficiently effective to be able to be useful into the future or not? You know, it can only be one or the other. I believe that what the current government needs to do is to give itself all of the options. It needs to put everything back on the table, and it needs to get independent advice to help it understand what it needs in the interim and what the likely best pathway is to that nuclear capability, which is still, you know, some way down the track, Peter.
All right, thank you, Peter Jennings. It's very sober and sensible advice. We'll see if they take any notice. Thank you for your time.